Have you ever come across a piece of information that's so potentially life-changing and incredible that you just want to share it with the world? I'm talking about the nervous system and its link to gut health and health issues. But I'm not an expert at this stuff. In fact, I'm still wrapping my head around it. I did bring on an expert who will be sharing the connection between trauma, the nervous system, and the gut. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why I am so bullish on the nervous system and holistic healing. I'd like to introduce you to Tamika Rose. She is a trauma-informed somatic therapist, and she's been working with people in the healing arena for 17 years. She is one of my current go-to people that I'm recommending all of the people in my gut gang to. And I'll say working with her through one-on-one sessions has been completely transformational, and I'm really excited to introduce you to her. She'll be sharing a basic but in-depth presentation about how the gut, nervous system, and trauma are all connected. And then we'll be having a bit of a chat about how it relates back to my health, and I'll also be asking important questions like, are we all buggered, or is it possible to heal? And if it is possible to heal, what do we do about it? Tamika, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Rory.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I think this is going to be possibly the best video I've made in terms of the information that we're about to cover.
Oh, that's high expectations there.
Yes, sorry about that. Well, I mean, it's true. I got to this point where with my health, I'm really at a really good place with my diet, right? Like, I'm happy to cruise here for a bit and things are improving in my life. But I got to this point where I felt like I couldn't really go any further with my diet. Like, there's small tweaks here and there, and I wanted to go deeper in my healing. And so these concepts that Tamika is going to share with you around the nervous system, this is what I'm working on now. You know, this is my number, I guess diet's probably number one for me still, but this is very close second. Anyway, what I'll get Tamika to do is I'll get her to run through like a bit of a brief presentation on how the nervous system works, how it connects to the gut, and then I'm going to go back in and relate a bunch of what she shared back into my health situation. Sound good?
What I'm going to start with, and I've created these slides just to make this information as digestible as possible, because it can be a little bit heady, and if you've never heard about the nervous system before, it can be a lot. So what I want to...
Hold up a sec before you do. Was that a gut health joke? Digestible?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't brush over that. Anyway, I'll zip my mouth unless I really have to pipe in.
So what I want to cover today is as quickly as I can and as simply as I can is how trauma impacts the nervous system, which activates survival mechanisms, either the fight, flight, or freeze, which creates nervous system dysregulation, which leads to gut issues, and how if we're wanting to heal our gut, we do need to take a holistic approach, yeah? Just a brief overview of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. Part of the peripheral nervous system includes the autonomic nervous system. So that's what I'm going to be speaking about today. So the autonomic includes the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the enteric, which is the gut. So let's go into the autonomic for a moment. So as you can see here with this picture, when we're in the ventral vagal parasympathetic, we're going to have very different physical, biological responses in comparison to the sympathetic. If we link this back to the gut, when we're in the ventral vagal parasympathetic, the digestion is stimulated. The intestines are stimulated. Compared to the sympathetic nervous system response, we have the digestion, which is inhibited, and intestines are inhibited. So already we can see just from this slide that depending on what state your nervous system is in, your digestion is directly affected. What is most important, I feel, for anyone who is really starting to learn about their nervous system in relation to their gut health, say, we need to know is that we need to understand the 3 different states of the nervous system so that you can start to identify what state you're in and then thus bring yourself back to that ventral vagal, because that's where the rest and digest and healing happens of the gut. So let's start with the bottom section, social engagement. This is the green section. This is what you've probably already heard as the rest and digest part of our nervous system. So this is the ventral vagal part of the parasympathetic nervous system, And this is known. So what I'm sharing with you here is polyvagal theory, which is from Dr. Stephen Porges. So this part of the nervous system is really known as the social engagement system, because when we have this portion of the nervous system sort of activated, it's because we feel safe. We feel safe in our body. We're feeling safe. We're perceiving safety. And that allows us to be our true self, to feel relaxed enough in our body so that we can connect with others. We can socialize, we can connect, we can play. And, we're basically in the moment. So when we feel safe, we're not only connected to our body, to other people, to life, to spirit, we end up being oriented to the environment. Thus, we're interested in other people. We want to connect. So when we're feeling safe, right, we naturally are social beings. When this part of the nervous system is flourishing and activated, we have access to joy, to playfulness, to openness, to curiosity, to compassion, to mindfulness. We're grounded and we're in the present. If we start to feel unsafe, or even if we perceive that we're not safe, whether that's a real or just a perceived threat, the first place that our nervous system goes to is the sympathetic. So as you can see from this picture, sympathetic is the fight or flight part of our system. So when we're in sympathetic, there is an increase of arousal, there is an increase of activation in the body. And the flight will feel a little bit different to the fight. So if we're in the flight response, there is a movement away from that perceived threat. Okay, let's say the perceived threat is like a tiger, right? We want to run from the tiger. We want to get away from the tiger. So how this response is going to feel in the body is we're going to feel a sense of panic. We're going to have fear. We're going to have anxiety. There's going to be worry and concern. Whereas if we're in the fight response, we're going to move towards that tiger to fight it. So these are our natural survival responses. How this is going to feel in the body, we might feel rage, anger, irritation, frustration. Now, if our arousal, which is our stress levels, keep increasing and we become overwhelmed with that stress and we can't run away or we cannot fight the tiger, the dorsal vagal freeze response kicks in. Okay, so because we are, we have a mammalian nervous system, right? Think about a mammal in the wild. Let's say a baby deer who's been caught by a lion, right? So if that baby deer has been caught by this lion, it cannot run away, it cannot fight, so its system is going to move into the dorsal vagal freeze response so that as it's being eaten by that lion, it's numb. It's not feeling that physical pain. So the freeze response is actually part of our mammalian system that prepares us for death. So if there's thwarted movement, we cannot fight, we cannot run, we go into the freeze response. So we'll know if we're in freeze because there's a sense of either being frozen or there is a sense of being like this inner collapse that happens inside of us. So dissociation, numbness, depression, helplessness, feeling shut down, shame, hopelessness, feeling trapped, and a sense of I can't all are part of the freeze response. I'm going to go just quickly but briefly into a little more detail of each state. So the ventral vagal regulation, that was the green from the picture before. So that's when the neuroception is of safety. And here it's a story of possibility, okay? And this is our social engagement system. This is really what I want you to probably take the most from this presentation is that this is rest and digest. This is the state that we really need and want to be in as often as possible so that our gut can heal.
So this is like your baseline, like this is just where you want to chill most of the time in your life.
Yeah, we want to do the nervous system healing work so that we can create a deeply regulated nervous system, which means we're living most of the time in ventral vagal.
Got it.
Yeah. If there is a neuroception of danger, we move, as I said before, into the sympathetic. So the lens of the world here is that it's a story of an unsafe world and unsafe people. And so here we're feeling like it's the fight-flight response, like I mentioned before, but we're feeling this hypervigilance because there's this sense of like impending danger, right? So the body can't quite relax, and all of the energy of the body and the resources move away from digestion into preparing to either run or fight the tiger. The body is not interested in digestion if it's sensing danger, right? It's not a priority. So here's some more dot points about the sympathetic. I'm not going to go into all of them, but it's really a sense that you're always on the go. It's hard to relax. We can have tension in the body. There's anxiety. There's defensiveness. So the physiology is completely changed in comparison to when we feel safe, right, in that ventral vagal place. Now, if we cannot run, we cannot flee, we go into the dorsal vagal freeze. So this is the collapsed, frozen, or shut down place, and it's really a neuroception of life threat. So the neuroception has moved from not just danger, but we're like, okay, I think I'm gonna die. So just a few more dot points here of this state, feeling shut down, and if you can imagine, in this state, your body is not going to be prioritizing digestion, because in this state, your body is literally preparing for death. And so everything is shutting down. Digestion shuts down. A lot of different systems in the body start to shut down in preparation for death.
That's definitely how I've felt many times throughout my health journey. Like, I felt like I was preparing for death in that state, right, of just being really frozen and shut down.
Yeah, and it's not a conscious thought of like, I want to die or anything like that. It's more of a physiological experience of feeling really exhausted, depressed, lethargic, sluggish. It's in this state, we don't have any physical energy. We don't have access to life force, yeah? There's a real shutting down here. So in relation to the gut, everything becomes so much more sluggish. So let's have a quick look at the nervous system of the gut. So this is called the enteric nervous system, and it's known as the second brain because it has over 100 million neurons located within the walls of the GI tract. So this is incredible. Like, this is the largest concentration of nervous system tissues outside of the brain. That huge amount of neurons that are located in the gut mean that it can pretty much run itself. However, it doesn't. It does send and receive messages in relation to the central nervous system, which is the brain, the brainstem, and the spinal cord. So this is what we call the gut-brain axis. So the enteric nervous system is communicating with the central nervous system, and it happens through the vagus nerve, which is that pink picture. A lot of you watching probably already know from what you've experienced with your gut issues that whatever is happening in your gut, whether you've got, your microbiome is out of balance, or you've got parasites, or, you've got pain, it really can throw your whole mood, your emotional mental state, your decision making can be affected. This is because of the gut-brain axis and the vagus nerve. But it's not just the gut that affects the brain, it's the brain that also affects the gut. So I'll quickly show you this picture here, which is that 90% of the vagus nerve fibers are afferent, which means that it's information of what is happening in the gut that gets sent up to the brain, such as levels of inflammation, hunger, fullness, energy metabolism, right? Sort of like, okay, here we go, brain. This is what's happening in the gut. Just thought you should know, right? And then the brain responds accordingly. But there is also this efferent communication, which is 10% of the vagus nerve fibers are moving from the brain down into the gut. So the gut is affected from the brain. So what we can see here is in this anatomy picture, these nerves are going into the stomach, into the small and large intestine. And so here we have a picture showing us directly that our digestive system is directly affected from the vagus nerve and what's happening there. So the vagus nerve is the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's either that dorsal vagal or the ventral vagal. If we are in sympathetic, here is the outcome to the digestive system. And as you can see here, it's not good. If we're in dorsal vagal, which is the freeze response, as you can see here, it's not good. Whereas if we're in ventral vagal, everything here is what we're actually wanting in relation to our gut healing. So if we're not working with the nervous system, you're pretty much managing symptoms and trying to put out continual fires just using food, but not addressing this other factor that is absolutely contributing to your gut problems. So the thing is that, you know, whatever is happening in the gut, when we have gut problems, it actually creates, so this is going back, I'll just flick back very quickly to this picture. When we have gut problems, it gets communicated to the brain, there is danger. That's basically what happens. So any kind of gut problem is going to lead to nervous system dysregulation, which then creates more gut problems. So because of this gut-brain axis, it becomes this really horrible negative loop and cycle. So knowing how to regulate the system really can help. But of course, we also need to be doing the physical things with the food and everything else from that physical side to make sure that we're sort of tackling this from all perspectives. In relation to the gut-brain axis, when we're regulated, which is when we're in that ventral vagal place, we have balanced emotions, we have immune tolerance, we have normal gut microbiota, we have an intact gut barrier, we have improved digestion, absorption, and elimination. And when we're dysregulated, everything that we don't want is what happens here. So that is the main message really of this presentation, is that we're really wanting to learn how to regulate our nervous system, because it's going to really support and assist our gut healing in a really, really huge way. So in relation to the nervous system and dysregulation, I want to share this thing called neuroception. So this is the idea that our always on 24/7 sensing ability is noticing cues of danger or cues of safety within us, within our environment, or between ourselves and others. So our nervous system is always sensing 24/7, going, am I safe or am I not safe, right? Now with the neuroception, it can either be matched or mismatched. Those that have a previous history of trauma or are quite dysregulated, they're going to have more mismatched neuroception. So what that means is that you could be in a completely safe environment, right? Let's say you walk into a room, say it's a social situation, yet you feel unsafe, you experience, say, social anxiety, or let's say you go to do a presentation and you have to speak in front of a group. Logically, you know you're safe, yet your body is going to be most people's bodies respond with so much fear and so much anxiety. So that is a mismatched neuroception. The other form of mismatched neuroception is that you could be in an unsafe environment, but actually be perceiving safety. And this tends to happen if we've grown up with chaos or neglect or abuse, and that's been normal for us, then we can perceive that as safe because that's what's been normal, right? How we are perceiving the moment, right, comes back to this concept of neuroception, and that will then dictate our level of stress and activation through the day. So someone who doesn't have a lot of trauma, or someone who's done the nervous system healing work to achieve a deep level of regulation, this is what their stress response through a typical day will look like. Have a look at the pink line here, yeah? It goes, down, then goes up. So when it goes up, that's an activation of stress. The stress is going up, but their system has learned how to then come back down. So when they experience stress, there's an activation, there might be a bit of tension, increase of heart rate, all the rest of it, but then they know how to bring their system back down. So this is what a really healthy person with a regulated nervous system, stress levels is going to look like through the day. And they typically are able to stay within what is called their window of tolerance. So that is the two blue lines you see here. This is the window of tolerance. When we stay within the window of tolerance, we stay in ventral vagal. We stay regulated. If we've had trauma, the impacts of trauma are going to decrease, make smaller that window of tolerance, which means that it's much harder to stay within the window. And typically, someone with trauma, or what we call nervous system dysregulation, is going to look like this through the day. Their stress levels are going to be pretty much all over the place. Their system has not learned how to come back down from that stress response and back into that ventral vagal regulator place. So they're going to flip into sympathetic, and then they might flip down, jump down into the freeze response. They might flick back up to sympathetic, back down into freeze, back up to sympathetic. They might stay in sympathetic for, let's say, an hour or so, back down to freeze, and they might be in freeze for an hour, and it's really chaos. It's quite chaotic, yeah? And they're really just a nervous system with lots of dysregulation is just reacting to life. It's just in constant reaction and never really feeling safe or relaxed or calm.
That looks like my brain right there.
Yes. Yes. And it's a lot of people, to be honest. It's a lot of people. When we have dysregulation, if we go back to this picture, we're really, the nervous system has become stuck on with the survival responses of either sympathetic or dorsal vagal. Now, some people, their nervous system might have a preference for sympathetic and be there most of the time. Other people might be more inclined to go into the freeze response. There are some people who live in freeze and it's called a functional freeze. I was in there for decades. Or some people just tend to ping pong between the two states. But really what's happening with dysregulation is that their system is stuck. It's stuck on and it doesn't know how to deactivate to come back down into ventral vagal. What causes nervous system dysregulation? So it's trauma. So let's have a quick chat about what trauma actually is. Once upon a time, I thought trauma was okay if someone's been to a war or they've had abuse or rape or been in a huge big car accident. However, what we know now is that trauma is not the event. It's actually what happens in our body as a result of the event. So it's completely subjective. It's not about the event. You could have 10 different people go through the same event and have 10 different responses as a result of that event. You might have 6 people come out from that event and be totally fine. And the other 4 people come out with trauma. So it's not about the event. It's what happens in our body. Really, it comes back down to it's anything, trauma is anything which has overwhelmed our nervous system's capacity to process it. So anything that was too much for our system to process. Now, when we're children, we need our caregivers to help us to process our feelings and emotions and to organize our thoughts and feelings. If we don't have that support and co-regulation, most of the time, if we go through something stressful, it can become traumatic because we didn't get that support to process our feelings.
So then 99% people would have some sort of trauma. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, most people have trauma but don't even realize they have trauma. When I started getting into somatic-based work, I had no idea I had trauma. All I knew was that I had Hashimoto's, I had relationship problems. The kind of relationships I was experiencing would trigger a lot of, unworthiness and betrayal and grief and sadness. And I had this feeling of just being separate within my body. So that was all I really knew. And when I started to really delve into my body, I discovered all of these traumas that I had suppressed and was stored in my unconscious through the body, which is exactly what all of my clients discover. When they start to do this work, they're actually surprised, very surprised at what they discover. And they were like, wow, I had no idea I was actually feeling this. What I'd like to speak to now is our attachment wiring. So if we are wired with an insecure attachment versus a secure attachment, we're going to have a dysregulated nervous system. In addition, if we're wired with an insecure attachment, that's going to lead to future potential traumas later on in life. So let me just cover this very briefly. In utero, our nervous system develops from week 5, and then our nervous system is shaped by our mother's nervous system. So if she was really regulated, you were wired with a really regulated system. If she was dysregulated, you were wired with a dysregulated system. So that was your first imprint. Then we have our birth. This is a huge event, and whatever has happened through our birth is going to deeply influence our nervous system. First 6 months of life, super crucial. When we're born, our ventral vagal portion of the parasympathetic nervous system is underdeveloped. And what develops this, remember, the ventral vagal is the rest and digest. So what develops this portion of the nervous system is us receiving adequate co-regulation. What that means is that we had a very attuned caregiver or mother who was able to really be attuned to us, recognize before we could even speak what we needed and to meet those needs. If our mother or father was dysregulated, they would not have been deeply attuned to us. So misattunement is actually the biggest form of attachment trauma in the West. And that can mean that our parents had their own trauma, so thus were not connected to their own body, their own internal responses, and thus not ours. Or perhaps our parents were just working a lot. They were busy, they weren't present, we had to go to daycare. Or maybe they were present, but maybe our mother was in a freeze response, maybe she had postnatal depression. There's so many reasons, but it's typically due to that misattunement that leads to an insecure attachment. And if we don't receive that co-regulation when our ventral vagal system is not developed, it means that we rely on our freeze response. So this sets up a lifelong pattern of our nervous system going into the freeze when we experience any kind of stress. Now, if a baby is left alone and their needs are not met, they go into that sympathetic a lot. And this is what can lead to what's known as global high intensity activation. From here on in, we're just going to refer to it as GIA. This is a term that comes from somatic experiencing, which is Peter Levine's trauma healing method. And it means that someone's system, so someone who has typical trauma, they can go through life and they can experience ventral vagal and they can experience moments of calm, but then when a trigger happens, they go into that sympathetic or freeze response, but then they can come back down. Someone who's in GIA is actually in moderate to high levels of sympathetic all of the time, and because of that overwhelm, they're also in moderate to high levels of freeze almost all of the time too. So it means that their system, it's like driving a car, let's say a race car, and you've got your foot on the accelerator to the max, plus your foot on the brake. Can you imagine what would happen to the motor of the car if that was the case, right? Things are eventually going to start to break and fall apart. This is what happens to someone's body when they have this GIA. So I'll jump now to the next period, and what I just want to mention really quickly with this is that any form of physical separation with our biological mother, because we're still figuring out that we're a separate being from her, is going to trigger survival responses and put us into that sympathetic or freeze response, which is not what we're wanting. We're wanting to really experience so much co-regulation, which is that feeling of like safety, and someone is there for us, someone has our back, and we're safe and the world is a safe place. So in summary, the first 5 years of our life, even though our nervous system is developing all the way to we're 26, the first 5 years of our life are really foundational for our nervous system, and in particular our attachment wiring. If we do not receive consistently what we needed, we usually end up with an insecure wiring. This leads to dysregulation. In addition, even if we had the most, perfect mother who really was, and father who was really there for us and present and meeting our needs, we actually receive, it's sort of like the degree of regulation that our mother's nervous system had is transferred to us. And this is what happened with my son. I was there, we had a home birth. I breastfed him till 3.5. We still co-sleep now. He's 5. And yet he has an insecure wiring in his nervous system because when I birthed him, I had that. So this is what has been transferred to him. So these first 5 years are absolutely crucial, so foundational for developing this wiring in our nervous system, which then really leads to us having a regulated nervous system or experiencing more dysregulation. If we do have this insecure wiring, what it means is that later on in life, when we go through stresses, the potential for those stresses to become traumatic increases. So it means that life is going to be experienced with much greater difficulty and much higher stress levels than someone who has a very secure wiring.
This makes so much of my life make sense, that whole presentation. Thank you for that. So in my case, I would have, well, I know that I have, but the global high intensity activation, the GIA, and all these different things, because I experience all those things. Is this something that can be reversed or turned around, all this kind of stuff? Because it seems a bit like, oh wow, like we're all buggered. Can this be turned around?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That is the good news.
Okay, good. I thought I was just like sinking further and further into my seat. I'm like, oh man, but that's good news. All right, give me the good news.
Yeah, the good news is that we can rewire our nervous system back to that secure place and into a place of being deeply regulated, which is where at our core we feel safe, we feel the world is a safe place, and we have great gut health and great physical health in general as a result of that.
Okay, how do I do that? Give me all the juice. Come on.
Well, nervous system work, I'll be brutally honest with you, as you know, right? It takes time. It takes like months minimum to years. It takes time because usually these patterns are lifelong, right? Usually there is so much that is needed to be addressed in order to regulate the system. Everyone's system is so different and so unique, so I can't just be like, here's what you do, because everyone's nervous system is so unique. When we work at the level of the nervous system, it becomes a very deeply personal journey because you're getting to learn about yourself, and learning to really support yourself and learning how to bring your system back to that calm, safe place and learning how to release from your body all of the accumulated, stored survival stress that's creating that dysregulation. So it's a journey of healing.
So then what would be some regulation practices? I know you got me starting to do some. What are some that people can start doing today and tomorrow to start that journey? Because I know that with this journey, you really do need to work with a practitioner, someone that you feel safe with, because as you work through this healing, stuff comes up, you need to work through it typically, because it is like trauma. You don't want to be left on your own with that kind of stuff. But what are some things that people can do at home to start regulating that system until they're able to work with someone?
A lovely little simple practice is the 4 and 8 breathing. So you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 counts and you exhale through your nose for 8 counts. That helps to decrease the sympathetic nervous system to bring it back to the parasympathetic. So that's a really simple practice people can start doing today.
All right, well, let's do it today. Can you, everyone watching, let's do it now. All right, let's go.
So just, first of all, close your eyes. And the first thing I want you to do is really notice your state. Yeah? So what state do you feel you're in this moment, Rory?
A little bit sympathetic, activated, like making sure this interview is going well and everything.
And how can you tell you're in sympathetic?
It's a bit like I don't feel relaxed. It's not like I don't feel chill. I feel like I'm a little bit on edge. Okay,
great. So to start the breath, you're breathing in for 4 counts through your nose. You can count that yourself. Then you're exhaling for 8 counts. And look, this deep, spontaneous breath and yawn that you're having here is a beautiful sign because this is your ventral vagal, your parasympathetic kicking in. So already your body is like, excellent. coming back to safety. Now, how does your body feel?
I feel less like up here, and I feel more grounded, definitely.
Okay, so there you go. So there is one practice.
Great.
Another practice is grounding. So one of the first things that happens when we feel unsafe or perceive that lack of safety is that we start to disconnect from the body. So the process of coming back into the body and getting grounded actually sends the message to the brain that we are safe. So just the most simple form of this is bringing your attention to your feet. Feeling your feet on the ground. And just breathing into your feet. And then as you do this, notice what happens in your body and track what you notice. For me, there's a deep breath. As soon as I did that, my system naturally wanted to take that deeper breath, which is my parasympathetic, the ventral vagal kicking in or deepening, because I already feel quite relaxed and regulated.
Same. My energy has gone from my head down to my feet. I feel like thinking less, which I think most of the time, and I'm more relaxed and calm. Oh.
Yep, see there's a yawn for me, yawn for you. So already our parasympathetic is kicking in. And it just is our systems. When they're relaxing, there's that activation happening, right?
I should do this before all interviews. It's a great idea.
Well, part of what we're wanting to do with regulating the nervous system is track our system. You've got to know, am I regulated? Am I sympathetic or am I in freeze? And what do I need to do to come back to regulation? Yeah, so I always teach my clients a bunch of different somatic, very simple, like this, like those practices, very simple somatic practices, so they can use them wherever they are at any time of the day to start to just support the system to come back to ventral vagal. And as we practice this, the nervous system starts to learn, it starts to develop a flexibility to go, oh, I'm in sympathetic, but I can come back down, right? It can activate and then it can come back down. So we're just teaching it, helping it to remember, relearn, or for some of us actually experience this for the first time, because some of us maybe from the womb or birth or early on have never experienced that co-regulation, right? So for some of us, it's learning for the first time, experiencing that ventral vagal. But yeah, simple practices. And as you practice this, what happens is that your window of tolerance starts to increase. And as that starts to increase, you start to, the feeling on the inside of your body is that it's like, I can handle whatever stress is going to come my way. There's a feeling of life feeling doable and manageable and being tolerable. And with that inner feeling of being resourced, what that leads to is that when you create that space through increasing the window of tolerance, all survival stresses naturally start to surface and bubble up. So with this trauma healing work, we never really want to go digging for trauma. Because if someone has a small window of tolerance, then they're not going to have the capacity to actually process it. So we've got to work on anchoring safety into the system first, increasing that window, so then naturally it starts to surface that old stuff that's stored in the body, stored emotions, stored survival stress, the stored trauma. It starts to bubble up naturally at a pace that the body has the capacity to actually process, so it's safe.
And that's called titration, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So what is that? That's where you're slowly able to handle things, because you don't want to just go from, all right, nada to just go all in, do you?
That's right, exactly. Yep, titration is a really crucial part of, healing trauma. When we're working with the nervous system, we just need to work bit by bit. We don't want to just dive on in if we don't have the capacity to backfire for us and take us back into sympathetic, if not freeze, which is not what we're wanting to create. We're wanting to come out of that and experience more ventral vagal.
It's just like what I'm doing with the reintroducing foods kind of concept is
That's
you don't
right.
want to just go from carnivore or intro gaps and you're like, cool, I'm going straight for the gluten and the croissants. No, you slowly introduce foods, you wait a bit and you're like, cool, we're sweet, and you increase. Same with like weights. If you want to get the gains, just like me, if you want to be swole like Rory, you don't go straight and do 400 bench presses. You literally slowly increase, kind of a
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I embarked on this carnivore gaps journey, end of November, I noticed that I started to get the benefits of regulation without doing the nervous system work. Is that something that can happen too, like with your diet?
100% because of the gut-brain axis, right? So whatever's happening in the gut is being communicated to the brain, which is then influencing your level of regulation.
It makes so much sense because as I removed all the things that were triggering from my body, just focus on the stuff that I could handle, my window of tolerance increased. I had more capacity emotionally, mentally, in all sorts of ways. And it was just like a huge game changer, which has now allowed me to start looking deeper into this nervous system stuff. Do you think people should start with the nervous system or the food or both, or is it different for everyone?
It's different for everybody. Someone who has GIA like yourself has the original trauma, so that is causing the dysregulation. But then on top of that, you have all of these secondary things that are activating your system, right? So someone with GIA, we need to first work on it's quite a different approach to someone with GIA compared to someone who doesn't have GIA. Someone with GIA, we've got to work on just decreasing the level of secondary activation so that their system can start to experience a little more calm, a little less activation, can start to stabilize more. So that's sort of the first step. Whereas someone who just has, not GIA, trauma, we're going to focus on, accessing what's stored in the body, the original trauma, and helping to release that incrementally. Your system doesn't really have the capacity for that yet. So with your system, food was creating a secondary level of activation, right, on top of the original trauma. So with you removing all those foods, which was sending a signal of danger to your nervous system continuously, you've eliminated so much secondary activation.
Yeah. It's interesting because I eliminated all those things, but then I noticed this anxiety that was just like chilling. And I'm like, yo, I didn't know I was anxious, right? And that's that GIA, right? That's that underlying dysregulation hum.
Someone can have anxiety and not necessarily have GIA. The thing with GIA is that their system is on 24/7. Yeah, so that's the difference. So,
Okay.
yeah, so.
Yeah. I think mine's probably a bit of a combo. So one thing you and I were talking about a couple of days ago was addiction. And this is something that people typically lean into to regulate their body unknowingly. So for myself, video games, watching Twitch, League of Legends, esports, Worlds, that kind of thing. And then also food, but mainly watching content and gaming has been my big regulator. Can you speak a little bit more on regulation and addictions and like how people can, I guess, move out of them or just the whole scenario?
So when we're dysregulated, when we have trauma, being in the body is very uncomfortable. People have learnt to disconnect from their body, to disconnect from their uncomfortable sensations. And so we have these things called protector parts which come in and really help the person to, in a way, be distracted away from the body. So when we have addictions, it's really a way of trying to manage all of these uncomfortable negative feelings in the body that we don't know what to do with. So when we have an addiction, it makes us feel better, whether that's gaming or food or drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever it could be. And it's a way of self-regulation. All addictions are just because that person doesn't know what to do with all of their uncomfortable feelings that are in their body.
Makes sense. I know that, because even though our parents do our best, if we don't get the regulation we need, we turn to things to self-regulate, right? And I know that myself, I definitely feel very comfortable in front of a computer screen and now a phone or like a console. And so those would have been things that I would have lent onto very intelligently in some way, right? To feel safe in front of that. And now as I start to remove those things or try and stay away, I notice those feelings on unsafety. I notice I just want to go straight to playing something and doing something. So with addictions, not everyone can go cold turkey, cut it out. Some people can, they have that capacity, but typically you want to focus on regulating first, and then as you become more regulated, then you might not feel the need to lean on those addictive type behaviors. Is that right?
Well, exactly, because when you understand why someone has an addiction, which is them really attempting to self-regulate, they won't know that's why they're doing it, but that's the deeper reason. If you address that problem and they learn how to self-regulate, their reliance on those addictions is no longer needed now. So the attachment, the pull towards those things naturally decreases, without them having to use willpower or to force themselves to stop doing that thing.
Got it. For me, I'm someone that typically, or at least in the past, would only really make changes when I got completely desperate and sick of the situation I was in. So, last year I was sick of my career and I made that choice to just screw it. I'm just going to really go for it, do what I love. That ended up happening. And I was really grateful for that opportunity. And then I got sick of things with my health as well around the same time. And then I decided to do something about it. Even though I'd been unwell for 10, 13 years, I tried a lot of things. I was like, you know what? This is it. Is this the same thing with nervous practices? Because right now, I'm finding that this stuff is not as sexy for me as food stuff. I have a little bit of resistance to actually doing nervous system work because just going to the kitchen and cooking just seems so much easier. And this sort of topic is not talked about as much as it should be in the carnivore gut health circles. What do I do to get over this kind of resistance that I have to having some kind of daily practice or doing nervous system work?
So resistance comes up all the time with my clients with this work. And it's because unconsciously, you know that in order to do this work, you've got to face what is suppressed in your body. You've got to face all those uncomfortable feelings and emotions so they can release. Because with nervous system healing work, feeling is healing, right? So we've got to feel all that uncomfortable stuff that at some point in the past got locked into our system because it was so overwhelming and so uncomfortable, right? And we didn't get that co-regulation or support to process it. So we got stuck in the body. So to do this work, to regulate, we've got to face all these parts of us that have fear, terror, feel grief, abandoned, betrayal, rejection, feel unworthy, feel not enough, that feel anxious, right? So it's not a fun thing. It's not sexy at all. However, it's the only way to really developing what's really the only way to becoming our true authentic self and to having good physical health, including the gut, and to thriving in life. So the resistance is really that. It's not a conscious thing with my clients, but it's an unconscious thing of oh my God, I'm going to have to face all that. And can I actually do that? Will I go into a hole of depression and never be able to get out? Or do I even have the capacity? And back when that trauma stuff happened, we didn't have the capacity. It was overwhelming. It was too much for us. That's why it got suppressed and became trauma, right? So there's still that younger part of us that's I can't do that. No, don't go there. Don't go there. At any cost, do not go there. These parts of us feel like they will die if they feel that stuff again, right? Because how we survived was not feeling it, right? So resistance is a part of this work. It's a natural part of it. So you've got to understand the resistance, where it comes from, which is what I just described. And then you have to go, okay, well, what I have to tell my clients is that you're never going to start this journey feeling safe, ever. So it's through starting this work that you start to develop that safety in your system, which makes the feeling journey, you increase your capacity to do that. Then it becomes really easy, really doable. Not always comfortable, but doable, right? So we just have to start. We just have to start. That's it.
Perfect. Okay, so you just got to get started. And I imagine discipline would play a role in like actually moving forward, right?
Well, in the beginning, well, typically, because people have so much resistance, being disciplined helps to move through that initial resistance, which can feel like you're wading through mud.
So I'd imagine if you're desperate and you're willing to do whatever it takes, this is probably where people come to, is they've tried a lot of things and they come to the nervous system work, similar with the diet. So if you're willing to do whatever and you're here, then I would do it if I was you. I've been resistant, but I'm committed to being disciplined with this, even if it starts with like 5-10 minutes a day of being conscious of my body, how I'm feeling, and then noticing as my body is changing, that the anxiety or the sympathetic is turning on, or I'm noticing that I'm moving to anger or rage or something, noticing that and then breathing, pausing, doing all these little different strategies that I've learned from you from our sessions has helped me become a better human, a better father, and actually start making far better decisions in my life. And, because I used to make really bad decisions around health, around finances, relationships, all sorts of things, like because I was so dysregulated that my brain was in a tiz, and then I would kind of make these decisions. Can you talk about that a bit before we wrap it up?
Sure. So when we're in sympathetic or freeze, we are perceiving danger. There is fear present. We feel like people are not safe. The world is not safe. Gosh, if we're in the freeze response, there's a neuroception of life threat, right? So that our body's feeling like, oh my gosh, I might die. So can you imagine trying to make really logical, life-affirming decisions when your whole system is communicating danger, 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 I'm not safe, the world is not safe? What kind of decisions are you going to make from that space?
Don't die. That's probably literally it.
You're going to make decisions based on survival, not thriving, right? So when we're in those disconnected places, we can't have disconnection and connection at the same time. So decisions that are going to lead us towards our path and to thriving really need to be made from ventral vagal, where we're connected to ourselves. We're actually connected to our feelings and desires and what we want. And then we can go, oh, okay, yeah, this is what my true self wants. And you make decisions to support that and moving towards what your true self desires. Whereas when we're in sympathetic, we're disconnected from our feelings and bodies. Same with freeze. We're focused on out here. Where's that tiger, right? Do I have to run or do I have to fight it? We're not connected to ourselves. So if we're not connected to ourselves, how can we truly support ourselves? How can we truly make choices that are in alignment with our true deepest self?
Yeah, this is a real process of like self-love, self-respect, looking after yourself is doing this kind of thing.
It's a process of first self-connection and then self-awareness. And then from there, you learn to really look after yourself, support yourself, and to meet all these needs that never got met from the past, right? There's parts of us which were never seen, were never heard, were never loved in the way that we needed. They never felt quite safe or secure. And we get to reparent these parts of us so that we truly come to a feeling place of feeling whole in our true self, feeling and knowing that we are enough as we are, feeling safe to be our true self and to enjoy connecting with other people, opening our heart, loving, receiving love. It's where we're really all wanting to be. Like, just the technical term for that is we've got to regulate our nervous system. And that's what I feel is like true embodiment.
So I wouldn't necessarily be exclusively an introvert. I'm probably just very dysregulated. Because when I'm in regulation, then
Yeah.
I am a lot more of an extrovert, that's for sure.
Exactly. That's right. That's
Interesting.
right. Yeah.
Dysregulation can also come from external environmental things, right? Because I know you had a story of a client who had breast implants and had them removed and like it kind of changed their life. And can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, just as our food and our state of our gut health influences our level of regulation or dysregulation, it's any kind of stress can lead to dysregulation. So, emotional stress is one, you know, chemical stress is another. So there's so many other factors, right? So I had a client who had breast implants. She attended my inner journey workshop, and through the workshop, she kept very quickly going into the freeze response and just shutting down. So I could see that her body had a very small window of tolerance, very small capacity to be able to process and even deal with her own feelings, right? So we had a couple of one-on-one sessions post workshop, and I taught her some simple regulation, somatic regulation practices, which she said were helpful, but then she would have to sleep after doing them because her system was either high sympathetic or freeze. She was just bouncing between the two. She was rarely regulated. She had all the symptoms of breast implant illness because she had researched that like crazy. And she realized that her breast implants were creating all of these physical health problems for her, like really, really bad symptoms. So she ended up having them removed. And what happened was that it regulated her system. So what we realized was that the continual leaking of that toxic chemical stuff was sending a message to her body and her nervous system of like danger, 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 right? Her body couldn't clear that stuff fast enough as it was leaking into her body. So it was just this continual signal and message of like danger. So that was triggering the dysregulation in her system.
Wow, that is really interesting. I've tried to film this outro like 3 times, so that's why we're laughing. It just sounds so dumb. So, look, that is very interesting, that whole breast implant removal story. I'm actually, for those that are interested in different ways that you can self-regulate, I'm actually working on a video at the moment about different self-regulation practices. So just subscribe to the channel, or I'll link it down below when that's ready. So that'll be really interesting. But if you want to work with Tamika further and get the support of someone like her, then you can go to her website, tamikarose.love, or www.tamikarose.love. Check out her Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Tamika Rose. That is where you'll find her. And book in. She's got a membership, which is really great. Tell me more about the membership.
So we have 2 calls a month. You have access to all these mini courses that have a lot of education in there about trauma healing, somatic therapy, nervous system. So yeah, it's a good way to begin the journey for those who are not quite ready to go deeper with the sessions or the immersion.
Yeah, and then I would start there. Like that's a really good place to start, is that membership, because that process that you took me through before, you do them twice a month, and that's just worth its weight in gold. Then you've got the one-on-one immersions, which is what I've done. I've done some or one-on-one sessions, but then you've got your immersions where you go work with people over a period of time, whether that's 6 to 12 sessions or more. That is what I've been doing with Tamika, and working with someone over time around this stuff allows you to get into the nitty-gritty, and it's been life-changing to say the least. So go book her calendar out, guys. Tell her I said g'day, and thank you so much again for coming on.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Nice.